Um, the, the Increased Technical Services Provider Access Act increases the number of conservation professionals for both farmers, land managers, anything that will support the conservation efforts for climate change. Seedlings for Sustainable Habitat Restoration Act authorizes the Forest Service to carry out restoration activities, and the Ready for Disaster Act provides sort of nationwide technical assistance centers that are proactive in signing up and helping disabled and older adults during disaster. So all 5 of those acts, the CCL is supporting as supporting acts. And 3 of them, there are versions in both the Senate and the House. Save Our Sequoias and is only a House legislation at the moment, and Seedlings for Sustainable Habitat is only in the Senate. What you need to know about those is if they move forward, you will usually hear a message from CCL to call your appropriate Congress people to support those acts. So we need to watch for those messages going forward. Are there any questions? So it's just an overview of the legislation. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. We do in the room. We have a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just, could you elaborate on what this carbon border is? I'm sorry for my ignorance. Carbon border? What
adjustment, the carbon border adjustment?
Yeah, so this is Joe, and that's going to be the next slide. We'll be getting into a lot of detail about the carbon border adjustment.
There's more detail about that and also permitting reform. So that's
coming. I just wanted to know what it means. Sorry.
Yeah.
That's trying to level the playing field, and you'll hear more about it, but making sure that if we tax our people, our citizens, that the business doesn't go overseas. So you do a border adjustment tax and it balances it all out. Yeah. But Joe will tell you more.
We'll get into that on the next slide if we can wait and be patient.
Thank you.
So this is just a summary of what's going on. All right, Joe.
Questions for Judith before I go on? Okay, I'm going to go on now. I was mistaken. It'll be on the slide after this. Now it's Dory's turn. Dory.
Thank you, Joe. And thank you, Judith, for the lead in. We each gave ourselves 5 minutes to cover a topic, and 5 minutes is not enough to talk about in-depth permitting reform. So I'm going to use this as a teaser, and in there's links to the panel discussion. If you weren't there, some of you guys were, right? We have John, you were there. Anybody else? No. But the panel discussion was excellent, and mainly because they brought together 3 diverse yet committed people, experts. They have Zan Fishman from the Bipartisan Council. He was a former teacher, and he laid it out. He's like, there's 3 things you need to remember. And it's like, okay, get that. And then Chad Whiteman was from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and that he had the business and the conservative, like, we all need to make it bipartisan because we need to get that kind of support to make these changes happen. And then Elon Sykes was from the he's an energy policy analyst from the Progressive Policy Institute, and he kept bringing it back to we, the citizens, and what we need to do to affect climate. So it was a really, really good balance. And so I encourage you, it's 30 minutes. I encourage you to listen to them talk. And one of the things the teacher said was, it is the most boring topic, but it is one of the most important topics. And it's not just pipelines, and I'll share with you a little personal experience from me in pipelines, but it's more, it's roads and bridges, but also even broadband. They're making it equitable in this climate movement. Having broadband for everyone is part of that equity piece. So when normally for federal money, federal grants, federal permits, it takes like 4.5 years, but it can be litigated, so it can go on. And all that time is money. It's it is money, it is security, it's too long a process. So here's my making it personal. I have protested pipelines. I have said, stop with these buildings. You're building a 30-year longer infrastructure that can carry anything, right? They may say it's for clean natural gas, but it could be for oil. So I used to stand there and stop. And yet sometimes we had to approve legislation that allowed drilling in the Anwar so that we could get solar incentives to help solar go, right? So there's a balance. We have to give and take, which is what Chad Whiteman was saying, is you can't have just what you want. We have to all feel like we're winning so that we can move forward together. And I think the biggest point I took away, and again, I'm coming from the renewable industry, is that renewables have further to go to reach parity on permitting. The fossil fuel industry has been asking for gives for years and years and years, and they have this, their path is paved much more in gold than ours. So renewables, these permitting reforms need to help renewables, and renewables need it even more because they have further to go to get to parity. So the other piece I'm going to add on this one slide, I'm going to tuck in two more things. One is that we have solutions actually right now that don't require 4.5, 6 years litigation, all this distributed generation, right? Creating power where you need it, local solar power on buildings and homes and in community arrays. We can do that now, and it can be done within 6 months, right? You start the application process and it's done. And we're solving that congested grid. Right now, power is coming from out west to serve Houston, to serve Dallas, to serve all the big cities. And that transmission line is clogged. And so renewables are actually, solar power is being shut down, wind power is being curtailed because it doesn't have room in the, think of it as a water pipeline, it's an electricity pipeline, there's no room. So if we generate electricity locally, then we help that grid transmission without having to go through these huge permits. This is not to say we should not ask for permit reform. We just know we can make a difference now. And I think, I don't know if Ginny has arrived yet. I think she didn't have the address, but one of our co-liaison leaders, lobbying liaison leaders, Ginny, shared with us this really cool, it's down there, the link to the labor resolution. And these are flight attendants, their labor. They put together this very cool resolution, and it's maybe 3 pages, 2 pages, but it starts with a whereas, and it lays out all the why we're doing this. So I encourage everybody to open that document up and read the whereases. Why are we caring about permit reform? So it does a lot of whereases, and then it says therefore, and then it says if we do this, this is what we're going to get. So it's, to me, it was impactful enough that I would love to say to grass tops, let's make a CCL Houston resolution that we then take to our local, so we don't have to travel to DC. We can do it right here in Texas and just say, because it lays it out so nicely. That's my plug. Are there any questions on permitting resolution?
Now, is this permitting for the state or for Houston or what?
The permit resolution that we're asking, permit reform that we're asking for is for the federal.
Oh,
But it
federal.
affects federal, but it can, you can ask for the same, like solar right now, during the summer, it takes forever to get a job permitted because they get backed up. There are cities and states that are doing instant solar permit. You apply and you get it because it's not a brainer. It's as easy as, anyway. So there are ways to do it.
I'm saying it already exists, and I think it exists in the Woodlands right now. I can go back and check.
Yep, well, good. I mean, that's, so permit reform covers all things. I mean, permitting.
Okay, I was asking about the scope, whether it's federal or state. I'm sorry, I missed the first part of it, but anyway, that's why I was asking. I definitely feel we ought to go look at local, and we can use this thing as a template, is your point, right?
Yep. This is
Okay.
Joe.
Exactly.
Let me try to jump in and try to respond to that question. So it turns out that most of the legislation that we're promoting and trying to get passed is, I would say, almost 90%, 95% is really at the federal level. And that's why, for example, we were in Washington, D.C. in June with a whole contingent of hundreds of CCL volunteers meeting with our elected representatives there and senators to talk to them about climate change. We're also starting to get more active at the state level. And earlier this year, we had almost 100 volunteers in Austin talking to our state representatives. But most of what we're talking about is really at the national level. Any other questions for Dory?
Yes, I have a question or maybe a comment, and it's there's perhaps no easy answer to it, but I've been reading a lot about permits for pipelines and mining, especially, and the NEPA reform, and I think the biggest challenge is the recognition of the trade-offs. There was an article on a pipeline that was being proposed in going through South Dakota, 300-mile pipeline to carry CO2 to one location where it would be injected, and it would capture CO2 from a lot of different emission sites. And it's bogged down because landowners do not want this pipeline to go through their land. There are safety concerns, etc. So it's the bogged down. There is reform, but the court system is just not set up, or the reform doesn't really deal enough with, at some point in time, stopping court action. Same applies to mining. I mean, we're building all these battery plants.
So if I can jump in quickly, because we are in a time schedule. Dory, would you like to try a response on this?
That is the challenge. And one of the things that's being debated, as I understand it, is whether there should be some federal overreach to stop states from being able to stop some of the infrastructure requests. And it's a heated debate. So it's ongoing.
But what you're describing, the summary, the bottom line is exactly the issues you described, that we cannot accomplish the clean energy revolution that we need without this type of permitting reform to streamline this whole activity. And that's really the bottom line. So I'm going to move on. And now we're finally up to the carbon border adjustment. And this is my set of slides here. I have 4 of them. I'm going to start off with a summary really of what is the carbon border adjustment, because I know there was a question and probably a lot of people have questions about this. It's not something that's very intuitive, but think of it as a package deal where logically a carbon border adjustment must be included with a carbon tax, or sometimes it's called a carbon fee. So if we are able to get a carbon tax or a carbon fee passed in the national legislation, that's basically economics 101, supply and demand. As the cost for fossil fuel energy increases, naturally there's going to be a reduction in people that want to use a more expensive energy source, and they're going to start transitioning more quickly to the lower cost renewable energies, wind, solar, hydro, and so on. So now this ties back to why we need a carbon border adjustment if we have a carbon tax. And the answer is that if we are able to successfully have a carbon tax on fossil fuels, and yet we have industry here in the United States that are exporting their products overseas internationally, and yet the energy companies here in the US think of them as having to be penalized in a way because they're paying a carbon tax, and that makes their products less competitive if they're trying to sell them outside of the US to countries that don't also have an equal carbon tax, right? There's a cost trade-off there, and US products will become less competitive, and that harms them. And the main intention of a carbon border adjustment is to equalize that, so US industry and jobs are not impacted by us having an expensive carbon tax here in the US. And how that would work is that if they do pay a carbon tax here in the US, and they want to export to a country that does not have a similar carbon tax, the carbon tax they paid in the US would be refunded to equalize and to avoid harming that industry when they're trying to export overseas. So that's the basic background of what a carbon border adjustment is. And that's described in that first bullet point. A carbon border adjustment is a really good thing. But it really must be coupled together with a U.S. domestic carbon tax or carbon fee. However, in the second bullet point, there's no immediate prospect of getting the votes in Congress for either a US carbon tax, carbon fee, whatever we want to call it. And likewise, no votes in Congress right now for a complete carbon border adjustment mechanism. And so we would like to have both of those things, but there's no immediate prospect of getting that right now. However, here in the third bullet point, we're saying that people have started talking about, you can think of it as a light version of a carbon border adjustment, not the full thing with all of the parts that are really required, but a light version. And this would be actually what would be called a carbon import tariff. And it would not include a US domestic carbon tax, would not include a border export rebate. So when products are imported into the US, even right now, forgetting about climate change and everything we're trying to do, those imports always have an import tariff applied to them, regardless of what type of product it is. And so there's been a lot of discussion in Congress and Washington, D.C., bipartisan discussion, Republicans and Democrats both talking together and agreeing that a light version of just having a carbon import tariff would be something good that potentially could be passed a lot more quickly than all of the other pieces that we really want together. So now I'm down to the next bullet point. And to make this all happen, I'm going to talk here about a new legislation called the Prove It Act of 2023. And so we can think of the Prove It Act as sort of a prerequisite to even a light version of a carbon import tariff or the full version of the full carbon border adjustment. And what we mean by that as a prerequisite is that when products are being imported into the United States, we need to understand the carbon intensity of those products. There are all different kinds of products. Some products may have a very, very low carbon intensity, meaning there's hardly any carbon that was burned and emitted into the atmosphere when those were manufactured. And there are other very specific products which have extremely high carbon intensity. Lots and lots of carbon was burned and allowed into our atmosphere. And that's what we really want to focus on. So the whole point here is that the Prove It Act will authorize a study. It's a research study that would be done by the US Department of Energy, that's the DOE, to focus on high intensity carbon products, and specifically aluminum, steel, iron, oil and gas, solar panels, and also wind turbines, which also have some amount of carbon intensity. And so the DOE, if this legislation passes, would be studying all of that to compare the carbon intensity of when those products are manufactured here in the US compared to the carbon intensity when those products are manufactured in other countries. And I have a few more slides to go through, but I've highlighted in yellow at the very bottom. This is actually a really critical legislation that we do want passed. We're asking all of our CCL volunteers to act on this to help raise the awareness. And there's a web link there on how you can support the Prove It Act of 2023. So now we have some Q&A, and I know there may be questions from folks here, but I've already listed some questions that I think you're going to ask. So does this Prove It Act legislation create a carbon border adjustment mechanism? And the answer is no. All it's going to do is to authorize a study to study the carbon intensity of very specific products. And that's the prerequisite that has to happen actually before we ever have a carbon border adjustment. So then why do we need the Prove It Act? And again, I've answered that already. It's the necessary groundwork foundation to identify the carbon intensity of those products that are coming in to the country. Why have I never heard about the Prove It Act? Well, it's relatively new legislation that was just introduced earlier this year in the Senate. That's the United States Senate with bipartisan support. And we're now working with all of our CCL volunteers to build support for co-sponsors of the bill in the House. And when there are enough co-sponsors and when we think that it could be passed, it'll then be introduced in the House for a vote. And the last bullet point here, some people wonder about the World Trade Organization, the WTO. They have very strict rules on import tariffs that can be applied for all countries when countries are starting to tax products being imported into their countries. Would a carbon import tariff actually be approved by the World Trade Organization without the United States having a domestic carbon tax? That's what many people are asking. And the answer is no. not under the standard WTO rules. However, the WTO could potentially receive approval with an exception that they allow for environmental considerations. And this is what other people are talking about as well. How do we get this approved by the WTO? And it could go through on that environmental exception if there are other additional conditions that are also met. A few more Q&A. Would a carbon import tariff provide all of the same climate benefits as a complete carbon border adjustment? And the answer is clearly no, because without a U.S. domestic carbon tax, the carbon import tariff would have no impact at all on existing U.S. domestic emissions from manufacturing. But it would be a good start. We have to start somewhere. And then the last questions here, what is the big political motivation for a carbon import tariff? Why do both Republicans and Democrats support this? Why are they in favor of it? And there's a couple of answers here. First of all, there's a political desire by Congress to accomplish other non-climate related objectives through trade policy, via, for example, our relations with China and Russia, just as an example. And this is a way to accomplish some other objectives. There's also concerns about imports of foreign products and the impact on U.S. job creation. There are concerns about supply chain security. Think about Russia and Ukraine and the war that's ongoing and what that's done to our supply chain in certain areas. And then the last point here, current polling indicates that a majority of right of center Republicans are okay with paying slightly more for lower carbon intensity products that are American made to help to create American jobs and new investments in the US. And then I list several different references for folks to look up and get more information. We have the very first item is the CCL video, catching up on the carbon border adjustment from our June conference. A couple of articles, what is the Prove It Act from the Niskanen Center, and a good article in the Washington Post. And again, a repeat of how all CCL volunteers can take action by clicking on that link. So I'll pause here to see if there's any quick questions we may answer on this.
Hey, Joe, you might want to add to this, to people who are not familiar, that Europe is on the glide path to implement their own border carbon adjustment in the next, couple of years.
Very true. That's an excellent point, Hans. Any quick questions?
A point that everybody needs to, don't be confused by the other act by the same name, the Prove It Act. That's been confusing a lot of people. There is another act that's before Congress by that name and has nothing to do with this Prove It Act. So
what is the other one, John? Can you give some background, please?
I forget it, since it has nothing to do with this, and I forget what it does have to do with.
It's also called the Prove It Act, but it's lowercase. Yeah. And this is all uppercase, the one that we support.
So just so that there's no confusion, if you go to the link we provided, you'll get to the exact correct one. Hopefully that'll solve the problem. I'm going to go on to the next slide now. And Mark?
Joe, can I ask one clarifying question, please?
Go ahead.
When they do carbon intensity studies, the DOE, are they going to look at whole life cycle of that product?
I would make an assumption that they are, but I don't know for certain exactly how they will do their study. I don't think that was specified.
They definitely need to do whole life cycle. Okay, carry on.
And I had a comment that our literature tends to emphasize the environmental aspects, and a lot of people would support the Prove It Act, except they don't really support environmental things. And so the Prove It Act just measures, it just requires the EPA to do a study. It doesn't require.
Exactly. That's all that it is. Okay, we're going to move on. We're on a time schedule. Mark will talk about climate as a national security issue.
Thank you, Joe. So I reviewed a live stream video that was made at the June conference, and it was a panel discussion. And there were 3 retired military officers. 2 of them were lieutenant generals from the Marines and Air Force. And then the other one was a retired vice admiral from the Navy. And the moderator was from a group called the Climate Security Program. They do have a website. They have a lot of information on climate and security, which I wasn't aware of. So that's a good resource. They started off talking about what are the national security risks of our changing climate, global warming. So they identified 3 domestically. One of them, when we have a disaster like a hurricane, often the National Guard gets called out. So that's part of the Department of Defense concern about their operations getting involved in that. Also, rising sea levels. There's a lot of military bases, probably mostly Navy on the coastlines. And so they are already making preparations, trying to figure out what they're going to do, if they're going to abandon the base or try to make adjustments for rising sea levels so they don't get flooded. And then there's the training aspect, and they one of the individuals specifically mentioned when it's too hot, they can't train, or it's dangerous for the humans involved in the training. So as our temperatures continue rising in the summer, that definitely impacts military preparation. There are 2 issues abroad. And so the main one is with global warming. We know droughts are increasing, and so that affects food and water supplies in other countries. And when those get at a critical level, it can stir up political unrest or unrest in those countries. And the military may need to get involved if there's U.S. interests there or U.S. citizens living in those places. And then, of course, if there's a big disaster abroad, sometimes our military will go in there and help restore services, keep the peace while people are recovering. And the other main point that they made in the video was all the military branches are preparing for energy resilience. So they are trying to make the switch to clean energy. I know the Army, Air Force and Army both have some targets like 50% reduction of fossil fuel usage by 2030, 2033, which is not anywhere near what we agreed to in the Paris Climate Accords, but it is a move in the right direction. The Marines are talking about using more fuel efficient vehicles and buildings. One final point that I'll make is more locally in Texas, we have a large Army base in Fort Hood, and they probably about 5 or 6 years ago began a huge solar project. It's like 63,000 solar panels. And so I believe they're getting about half of their energy needs from that. So definitely hats off to the Army for doing that pilot project, and it's still going. That's it for my presentation today, and you can go to CCL Community to view this video under the live streaming conference YouTube videos. Would anybody like to comment or ask a question?
I had a quick question. Is there any mention made of climate change and particularly extreme weather effects on maintenance, as in maintenance of equipment and such like that?
No, I don't know about that. Sorry.
One comment I was going to make is our Navy secures all the shipping lanes all over the world, which is costing us billions of dollars, just to so other countries can ship energy, oil and gas around the world. And it's a service we provide. for all the shipping.
Yeah, thank you. It's another concern that they have, I'm sure.
That's a good point. And also related to what Dan just mentioned, if we remember back to what was happening in Iraq with all of the war activity there and our U.S. troops and all the supply convoys, the diesel and gasoline trucks that were having to transit through those roads and being blown up, and soldiers killed just protecting those supply convoys. All of that required because of the use of fossil fuels. Any other questions for Mark before I move on?
We have one in the room here, Joe.
Go ahead.
A lot of conversations have happened around climate refugees and the implications of climate refugees then going to other countries. Was there any discussion about that?
Not that I recall, but I think it's certainly a valid point because that is disruptive to those, especially the countries that don't have a strong government. So yeah, I think the military could be involved. Good point.
Okay, I'm going to move on now. Thank you, Mark. And Court?
All right, so during a DC conference, after like the 2 days of in and out seminars, and then your last day is a lobby day where you're going on into offices and lobbying with different representatives and senators. At the end, they ask folks to first-time conference attendees to go up on the big stage and just say what they got out of their DC experience. And it's like a really fun opportunity. So what we're going to do is, so the greater Houston area had 8 CCL volunteers that chose to take time out of their lives to go to DC to lobby. And 3 of them are here, 2 in the room, 1 online. So first and they're going to give a 1-minute elevator speech of what they got out of their DC experience. So Waqar, we'll start with you, and then we'll come back in the room.
Okay, thanks very much. So my name is Waqar Qureshi, and this is the first time I had the opportunity to go to Washington, DC. It was really a wonderful experience. First of all, it was meeting a lot of people that I've been working with over a couple of years, but had not yet met in person. So in addition to Houston chapter, some of you I had met before that. So in addition to Houston chapter, I've also been working with Team Oil, engaging oil and gas companies, and there's a number of people there, like Hans and Bill Bray, Larry Kramer, others. Who had not met in person. So that was a wonderful opportunity. And also just meeting all of the CCL volunteers who were there, and coming from many different paths that got them there. So that was all very very eye-opening for me. I think there's going to be other people talking about a lot of things. So I'm going to keep this very short. Going to the various offices that we went to, really, I think, gave a feel for how things are in Washington, D.C., going into the Senate and House office buildings, into individual offices, and talking to the mostly aides that we met. So I'll leave it at that because I know others are going to talk about this. In case anyone's interested in the Team Oil activities I mentioned, I'll put my email in the chat, and you can get in touch regarding that as well. Okay, thanks.
Thank you so much. Okay, thanks, Judith, for that reminder. Jenny, can you explain your experience, like less than a minute?
Yes, and do I sit right here?
Move your chair up a little bit, and this
should be in the
owl. Well, there you go. Perfect.
You've already used up 5 seconds.
Yeah, I'm Jenny McDavid, and this was a great experience. I've been to DC before lobbying with my labor unions, so this is the first time on climate issues. And But I'm used to meeting when the, members of each of the Democratic representatives. And so we didn't have appointments in Sylvia Garcia's office or Al Green's office. So I made some impromptu appointments, and John Glover helped us out with the Sylvia Garcia meeting. And then we also had an impromptu meeting with Al Green's office as well. And I think both meetings turned out to be really well. What was really interesting was the Sheila Jackson Lee meeting, because Judith, her staff can be really interesting. We could not get an appointment. So we had planned just a lit drop off at noon. So 3 of us show up at noon to drop off literature. And while we're there, we're like, well, is there anyone we can talk to while we're here? So the legislative director happened to be there. She introduced us to a graduate student who's studying environmental policy. We sat down to talk about CCL issues. The legislative director took pictures of her name tags, texted them to Sheila Jackson Lee, who was in a committee hearing. So we ended up getting escorted to the committee meeting. They pulled Sheila out of the committee hearing to meet with us in the hallway. And we also got to meet the Secretary of the Interior while we were there too. So that was just, from thinking this meeting was just going to be a lit drop off to being the one and only meeting the entire conference, we actually met with a congressperson, and not just a congressperson that got to meet a cabinet secretary. Was just incredible. So it was a great experience. And there's a lot of smart people involved in CCL. And so I still kind of I'm just a flight attendant. Sometimes I had to wrap my head around some of these technical issues, but doing the best I can. But anyway, it was a great experience. And I think I agreed with Judith. I'm going to, until we find someone in 29, Lulu DeVore, who's up there on the screen. Oh, no, she's not up there on the screen. She lives in 29, but we've been unsuccessful contact on her about being the liaison for Sylvia's office. So I'm going to do it in the interim until we find someone who lives in that district. So it was a great experience. Thank you. And Jenny, before you push back, before you arrived, I shared about your labor union resolution and I was like, we should do that to CCL, to our local, just go to local offices. And it was a really, really good resolution. So thank you for your work. I hope it wasn't too long. I probably could have shortened it. But... Whereas, it reads. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing. John Glover went also to DC.
Okay, very quickly. The first 3 days were the conference, and there were sessions of all types. And I'm come from the academic world. I like conferences and to hear talks, and it was all very interesting. And but that really wasn't the main reason we're there was for lobbying, and that was all lined up for Tuesday. And I have to say, I was very confused, as were many other people, what was going to happen. The scheduling of the meetings had changed because of the COVID being right in the middle of all this. And so I wasn't sure when my meetings were going to be and who was going to be in it. I had arranged the meeting with our Congresswoman, Lizzie Fletcher, and that was under control. But I ended up going to 3 other meetings. You see, well, first of all, Jenny was you were on my first meeting with Lizzie Fletcher's office, right? And I had to find Jenny when I was there and get her added to the team. That was great. And I've forgotten how you got assigned, but anyway.
Well, I think I requested to. I live in Sheila's district, but I did request to meet with all the Democratic delegates. If there were appointments made, I wanted to join them if I could.
So anyway, just finish up. The greatest fun was on lobby day itself, walking the halls and seeing people saying, okay, we're trying to get together a meeting. They would ad hoc put together a meeting team right there in the hallways, and they'd say, who's going to say, well, I can talk about EICDA, and they said, okay, that's your topic. And then they would get somebody for some other topic and said, looks like we got a team. And we'd go in and had a really good meeting with a legislative director, even though it wasn't arranged in advance at all. So I thought it was really good.
On your feet planning. Oh, and then hands.
Yeah, I
Hands
just,
and,
so, thank you all very much for sharing. Hans and Larry, like if you wanted to just give a quick sentence or like 3 words of what you got.
I'll be very, very brief. I mean, I won't talk about the experience, just the outcome, but I was in 5 meetings, all with Republican, not, the Republican offices. And actually I came away rather encouraged about the prospects for some sort of permitting review because, pretty much to a man, or a woman, as the case may be, they're all at least philosophically in agreement that there needs to be permitting reform. So I'm hopeful that something will come out of that based on those interactions.
I would like to second what Hans said, and that is, I met with 5 Republican offices, and they all seem to be favorable towards doing some kind of legislation on permitting reform. That's all I had to say.
Yeah.
Great. All right. Thank you all. And we can jump to the next portion of our meeting.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Okay, and now we have Bob talking about the Inflation Reduction Act.
And I'll be very quick. First of all, we did it. A year ago, we passed the most important climate legislation ever. 369 billion. Hopefully to reduce climate pollution by 40% by 2030. But this only happens if we actually use those funds. We as consumers, businesses, agencies, and so forth. Next slide. The importance of using those actual credits and rebates. This is a slide that shows the new vehicles that are electrical in 2030, and a very solid university modeling program has a low of 19% and a high of 57%. With transportation, nearly 25% of all US emissions, you can see what a huge difference more people using those credits and buying electric vehicles will do. Next slide. Because of the importance of this, we've set up the CCL, working with some other organizations, to set up a federal funds climate fast track team. And the priorities initially are to do presentations to let consumers know about rebates and tax credits for these items that have the most impact on cutting greenhouse gases. A second area is advocacy. If Houston City is deciding they're not going to bother to apply for a major fund, then we will try to convince them otherwise. Same way with state agencies, and we'll keep looking out for other needs. Next slide. I'll be doing a longer presentation here in a couple of months, but if you want to get started, you can sign up to help by going to this Google form there, and I'm putting all of that in the chat. If you know of some group that is willing to do presentations, then you can go ahead and email me. I hope soon we will have people in Houston giving the presentation, and I can give Zoom presentations from Austin, where I live, all over. And finally, if you want to learn more about the tax credits and rebates available to you, by far the best place to go is rewiringamerica.org. They have an IRA calculator that sifts through the amazing complexities that can be involved to let you know what you can do and tell you about why it's important and how to do it. So that's all I have.
Any questions for Bob?
Jenny does here. I have one.
Bob, I was wondering, what kind of, are we working with a media team, and are there really some really good environmental reporters helping to get the word out? I mean, like trying to get someone to go on Deborah Duncan's show, or you know, some consumer oriented shows or reporters that you know, I don't know. What are we doing with the media team to get the word out as well?
That's a great idea. I originally started out to attack this on every front, and I couldn't manage it all and didn't get leaders to step forward for that. So although we would like to do a media team, we're putting that on the back burner for now, because I don't have people, and we really need to get these presentations. You know, we should be doing hundreds of these presentations. And so that's what's going on with that. So no, we are not currently working with that, although there are some other people on staff of nonprofit organizations who are.
I'd like to add on to that, because that was a very good point. And the situation here with CCL is that we're trying to do a lot of really good things, but we're constrained by the number of volunteers we have and the volunteers that are willing to actively participate. And that's why for every meeting that we have, we want to make everyone who attends aware of this, that if you have spare time, if you're willing to volunteer for these activities, we really need your help. And we can't do this without more volunteers becoming more active.
Okay, Joe, can I
Yes.
just add that bouncing off of that, it inspires me. Thank you, Bob, you inspired me. So we could do Houston, we used to do solar home tours, but we could do climate fast track fund team at home, like spot workshops. Yeah. And I could open my home because we have the induction cook stove, we have the electric vehicles, we have the electric lawnmower here.
The visual.
We can, so it's a touch and see and ask questions, and I can probably get through my contacts, you know, one in each of our districts, say. So we do a fast track home info session.
Wonderful.
Bob, I just sent a note to you. I'm a member, or I'm a representative to something called the UU Houston Network, which is all 13 of the Houston UU churches in the area.
Right.
And meet once a month. And that would be an opportunity. I'm sure a lot of us would be glad to get our churches be the venue for some of these, physical venue for some of this stuff. And also, particularly in Northwoods, for example, we have a fantastic setup for a hybrid stuff. We can very easily do Zoom and in person together. And I think Emerson has the same thing. And the Emerson group is an example right now on this meeting. So anyway, just wanted to throw that out there. And I sent you an email.
Great. I'm doing a presentation at First UU Austin later this year.
All right, very good. I'm going to move on to try to stay on schedule here. And thank you very much, Bob. Has Cheryl joined? Cheryl, are you out there?
Here.
Oh, excellent.
I'm here.
Excellent. So Cheryl Clark, one of our other volunteers up in the Dallas area, is now going to give us a presentation about how we can provide our appreciation to our Texas state legislators for some of the good votes that they voted on this year. Cheryl, would you like to share your screen? I'm going to stop sharing.
Sure, I can do that. Joe, how much time do I have?
10 minutes. Is that enough?
Yeah, that should be plenty of time.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. My name is Cheryl Clark. I am up in the Denton chapter, north of DFW. I've been with CCL since about 2015, and I'm a group leader. And I've met some of you, but not all of you. So thanks for being here. We just had our chapter meeting. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen if I can find it again. All right. That was my chapter meeting. Let me see. Where did I put this? Oh, I know what I did. Okay. So this is what Joe is showing you. I'm probably not going to take the time for everyone to follow along because this could take a while if we do that, but I'm going to go ahead and put the link in the chat. Texas Appreciation Campaign website. So as you know, CCL sends out these awesome action links. And when you fill in your information, it just creates a letter. And all you have to do is put in your information and it sends it directly to your legislators. Unfortunately, we don't have an app like that just for our state. So I created a website which talks you through the process of doing the same thing. But it does require a little bit of legwork on your part. But I put it all in one single document to make it a little bit easier. So the 88th regular session of the Texas State Legislature recently passed a few modest but important bills that advance efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions across the state. And of course, our job as CCLers is to show appreciation for those things, even if it's just tiny little steps forward. So if you go to this website, I have embedded a link so you can find out who your representatives are. What county is Houston in?
Harris County.
Harris?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just going to go down to Harris and click find.
Don't forget Montgomery. We're the Woodlands.
Okay. So I'm just going to click. Okay. Wow, there's a lot here.
Yeah, you got it.
Whoops. Okay, it took me to that person. Okay, but anyway, if you put in your address, it'll tell you who your representatives are. Of course, this didn't work real well because it gives me all the representatives. But if you put in your address, and you may already know who your representatives are. So the second name in the list after you put in your address is your Texas State House representative. Or your Senate, or the third name is your senator, and it gives you your Senate district number. You can write that information down, or you can just leave this page open. It will automatically stay open so that you know who those people are. And then below, I've created a document with information about the bills that were passed and who voted what on each bill. So we have 8 bills, and I have a description of each bill under summary, so you can see what it's about. I had the results from the Texas Senate. For example, the first one, it's a voice vote. It wasn't recorded, so we don't know who voted what on that one. The second one, all state senators voted in favor. So for like that one, you would be able to automatically thank your senator for that. Then over on the right side, I've got the Texas House voting results. It tells you who voted nay, who just didn't vote because they were absent, and who voted, or who didn't vote, who voted didn't vote because they were absent. And if relevant, I put the people who did vote for it. So all of that information is here. So the point of this is for you to be able to go through and find your state senator's name and state representative's name to figure out how they voted. For the most part, most of our representatives and senators did vote for most of these, but there were a few exceptions. For example, if Dade Phelan is your representative, he didn't vote on a lot of these, or he voted against a lot of these. So you can go through that list and figure out who voted what. SB 1001 and SB 1002 had a lot of people who voted against them. Let me add, because this has been a chief question a lot of people have had. If it has SB, that is a Senate bill, and I think some of them say HB. Yeah, HB is a House bill. But apparently in Texas, if I understand correctly, the number and designation doesn't change whether it's being voted on in the Senate or the House. So the number is going to stay the same. So if it's SB 785, you don't have to go back and try to find a matching House bill number. Okay, any questions at this point? I feel like I'm going fast.
No particular question, but thank you for your work. Looks really great.
Okay, sure, you're welcome. So then I give you some instructions for creating your letter to send to each of your representatives, and I've actually created a letter already for you. So if you want, all you have to do is copy and paste this. It does list all of the bills, as you can see. Your representative or senator may not have voted for all of these. So my recommendation is just copy and paste the entire letter. and then just remove the ones that your representative or senator did not vote in favor of. What you might want to do in addition to that, I'm not sure I would replicate this if there are a lot of people in the same district, but maybe one person from each district could also go back to the ones that your representative did not vote in favor of and ask them what it was about that bill that they couldn't vote for. So again, I think that would be important information. I'm not sure that every person in a district should do that though. If you don't like my letter or you want to change up some wording, feel free to do so. This just makes it a lot quicker and easier. All right. And then all you have to do to email your representatives is to basically click on their names. So if you go back up here to the top, I'm going to pretend that Representative Sam Harless is my representative right now. Do you guys see his page on here now? Am I sharing his page? Okay,
yes.
Good. So for him, I have this little link next to his name that says email. So I'm just going to click on him. I fill out all my information. Of course, I'm not one of his constituents, so I won't actually send that. You can put in the subject line, thank you for your work, or you can put appreciation for your votes. You can just put appreciation, whatever you want to put in the subject. And then all you got to do is copy and paste your message into the box and then click submit. So it's actually fairly easy to write to your representatives. Let me go back and see if I can find a senator name. It is slightly different for senators, but not too terribly different. It's not giving me senators right now. Okay, I'll just go ahead and put in my information and don't send me any dirty letters, please. So that's a joke. So the third person is my Senator Tan Parker. And if I go to his page, it's a little bit different because I don't have the email link right next to his name. I have to click over here on the right where it says email your senator. But beyond that, it's very similar. I just fill out this form, put in a subject like appreciation, whatever, put in my message and send message. So very easy. Any questions now or comments?
Nope.
All right, the final step that we would really like for you to take, and I'm sure Joe would really love for you to take so he can keep up with how many people are doing what, is to then put that information into CCL Community. To do that, of course, you have to be logged in. I don't know why I'm not logged in, but I did embed right here the page so you can log right in. It may open a new screen like it's doing on my computer. It depends on your settings, I guess. Then you'll just click on the take action. Actually, not that one. Let me go into the action tracker.
There you go. And
I'm going to log an action right here. Contact with legislator. This one does not have a specific policy. You will click state or province, and it will ask you to confirm if it's actually a state action. Yes, this is a state action. And then you click next. These are personal letters. And then you will put for your legislator, and I have something specific for you to put. Let me see. For the legislator's name, you're going to write Texas State House Representative, then your House member's name, and then HD and the district number. After you do that, let me go back to here. Let me see, who was mine? Parker. I'm just going to put that in. Senator Parker. Of course, I'm not going to actually send this, so I'm just going to put that for now. In your notes, you'll copy and paste your letter that you sent, and then you'll click next. I don't remember if that records it or not, but I'm not going to take that step just in case it does. And then after you've done that, you're going to go back and click take action again and do the same thing for your senator, your state senator. In place of where you put their name, you'll put Texas senator, your state senator's name, SD, and the state district number. And here's an example of that. And then you're going to go through the same process. And then congratulations, you've taken a positive step toward building a relationship with your state legislators. Woohoo! Thanks from everyone at CCL Texas. Hopefully I didn't go through that too quickly. Does anyone have any questions or need any help with anything?
Thank you, Cheryl. That was really great. If there's a
You're
quick
welcome.
question, we can take one question and then we're going to move on.
Where do we find that link? Is it on the CCL community under the Texas Action Team?
It's in the slide deck that we were reviewing. And I think Cheryl
I also put
that
it in
into
the chat.
Yeah, it's in the chat. An excellent question. Okay, thank you, Cheryl. And I'm going to move on now. We're almost out of time. I'm going to share my screen again. All right. The next item here, whoops, I went too quickly. This is our reminder for everyone. Once we finish our meeting, if you have some spare time, please click on the link here, cclusa.org/call, and make the phone call to all of the representatives and senators that for those that you're in the district for. This is at the national level, and you'll just follow the script. Very simple, very easy to do. We also have at 12 noon starting today, immediately after this meeting, our CCL National Monthly Speaker, who this month is Ramona Liberoff, Executive Director for the Platform for Accelerating the Circular Economy. That'll be a really good talk, and the link here if you want to join that. A few other announcements here. Texas is in the CCL Third Coast region, which also includes Louisiana and Mississippi. And our Third Coast Regional Conference will be in New Orleans on October 7th. And registration is now open if you have an interest in attending that. And now we're up to our lever status reports. And let's try to go through these quickly. Judith?
So she put in the chat that she had to step out for her out of town engagement. So do you want to give, Jenny, do you want to give a brief? It looks like y'all are filling positions.
Sure.
Look at what you've done. Woohoo.
Yeah, well, Judith was on the steering committee call. She'd asked me to co-chair this committee with her. So we worked on filling in the holes. Of course, some of these people are interim people like me, Texas District 29, because I don't live in 29, I live in 18. But we just weren't successful getting in touch with Lulu or someone else in that district to be the liaison. So, but just the presentation we just got, I think this committee's got some marching orders to
Jenny,
do some work between.
Jenny, I have a very quick question for you. And I was asking Judith last week. So have all of these new people now confirmed and have accepted this? Because there's official paperwork I need to submit to get this taken care of.
Yes, she had. Yeah, that's why my name replaced Lulu's, because I mean we had a different list up there for the steering committee meeting, and this list is slightly different because we didn't get confirmations from everybody that we had intended to keep on the list.
Okay.
So, but the people that are on this list are confirmed.
Would you mind dropping me an email just so I have that confirmation, please?
Okay, certainly.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to move on.
Okay.
Court?
What was that?
There is a correction.
Oh, there is a correction. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I need an email just to confirm everything. Court?
Okay.
So for grass tops, I sent out a few emails to better understand how HISD and Magnolia ISD will be executing their funds for electric buses or propane buses. And then the same with Metro. All of these three entities got some sort of funding to do a low energy bus conversion. And I feel really inspired after hearing Cheryl, so I'll be sure to, thank our state representatives and continue to just follow how Larry Howe is leading our state representative Grass Tops. And then I look forward to reaching out to Jenny to talk about your labor whereas statement and figuring out how maybe we can do that for the greater Houston area. So that's my update.
Thank you, Court. Mark?
Oh, thank you, Joe. Just one tabling opportunity that we have coming up. So it's pretty far in the future. September 29th and 30th, there is a climate summit at U of H downtown. And the 29th is a Friday, the 30th is a Saturday. So hopefully we can get a team up. I'll try to find out details about getting approval for that, for tabling.
Excellent.
That's the update.
Okay, thank you. And
maybe,
I'm
Joe,
sorry.
one thought, maybe Mark, some of these house info session fast track things could be tabling events, like you could think of them as. All right, sorry, Joe, keep going.
Mark, were you done? Did you need to add anything?
No, that's it.
Okay.
Just real quick, while you're talking about tabling too, well, we do have a tabling event coming up in Kingwood on September the 9th at the Pickle Festival, if anyone's interested in helping. Hopefully the weather will turn by then.
And if you want to send me an article about that, I can put that in the September newsletter.
I'll have to, I don't have an article myself, but I know how to get one. I'll do that.
I'll need it today though, or by Sunday tomorrow.
I'll get you something today. Perfect.
Okay, and now we're up to the media team, and just a couple of highlights here. Everyone should have received the CCL Houston metro area newsletter for the July 3rd and earlier this week, August 7th. If you did not receive that, you'll need to let me know so I can figure out what happened. We're also on social media, and one bullet point here that there will be a Third Coast Regional LTE writing party. That's letters to the editor of the local papers. The link is here if anybody is interested, August 24th. And again, just to reemphasize what we talked about earlier, that we can't get anything done if we don't have volunteers that are willing to help out. So everybody's encouraged to participate in media or in any other of these areas if you have an interest. And what I always do, I provide a few, not too many, but a few examples of what we've been posting on social media. On the left is where we created a Mastodon account, and that was my introduction of CCL to Mastodon on the left. And the new Instagram Threads account on the right, we did the same thing, our introduction. And with the help of Chelsea, one of our high school students, we're now active again on Instagram. And so a shout out to Chelsea. I'm not sure if she's out there today with us. And some other examples here. Here's the Prove It Act on the left, letting people know on social media we need people's support. And on the right, new heat records almost every day now. Please support the electric grid and again, permitting reform. On the left again was I call this our family photo from Washington, D.C. when we were lobbying there in June. And on the right, impacts that are showing up in various countries. In this example, this is Uruguay, where they've now run out of normal, regular drinking water, and they have to mix their salty ocean water with their regular drinking water just to have something to drink. And here's a couple of slides about En-ROADS on the left, letting people know about En-ROADS. And on the right, we had a really fun Climate Action Now party back in May, where many people from CCL participated and had fun with that. Dory, chapter development.
Just to say that I love volunteers to come help reach out to new members and make them feel welcome and plug them in where Joe wants them plugged in. So let me know if you want to help, and then welcome all. Okay.
Can I ask something?
Yes.
So one thing that we'll do whenever it gets cooler, if that's a thing, is we'll have like meet and greets where we'll just be able to socialize. Sometimes we use opportunities with other organizations to do what folks might see as more like boots on the ground volunteering. So planting trees, things like that, where we don't do that. So we lobby and do other things, as you've heard. But so just know in the fall, there'll be some opportunities to have opportunities to interact with other CCL volunteers, either walking at a park or volunteering for another Houston organization just to give back.
I put a plug for the new land bridges. I think you'd be great to give us a little tour, and if we could do some planting, great, but okay. Got it. Back to you, Joe.
All right, thank you. And that's the end of our official part of our meeting. And what we usually like to do at the end here, let me stop sharing, is just to have a quick roundtable from folks that are still on the call, provide any feedback. If anybody wants to share anything at all, please go ahead.
Joe, we have another guest who arrived. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Oh, sure. My name's Ritu. I've been in Houston for the last 11 years now. For the last couple of years, started working on the climate piece through a social enterprise and got really interested in what was happening in the community. So that's what brings me here.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.
And I didn't know if you wanted to take a picture, maybe it's too late if people dropped off, so no picture this time, huh?
We can definitely take a picture if people want to turn on their cameras.
Yeah, the thing is, John has to talk, we all have to stand here,
You
John has
can't
to
see me
talk the
though.
whole time.
Where am I in the middle of
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
Okay, I'm
You're good,
supposed
you're
to
good. So we just have
talk
to
and
talk,
talk and
and
talk.
I'll turn a
How
light on.
about
Hold on.
Dan? How about Dan and Michael? Michael, you want to turn on your camera, and Dan?
Fine.
And then John, keep talking.
All right, I'm supposed to talk here and I will do that. You saw that picture of all the people standing in front of the Capitol?
I'm trying to do
I
it.
wasn't in the picture, but you can't prove that I wasn't
No,
because you
yeah.
can't see anything. I'm not appearing anywhere on this.
Oh, I see. Oh, it's too close.
Okay, I'm going to count down. 3.
My
Two.
camera does not working.
Okay,
Right there.
I'm going to count down now. 3, 2, 1.
Yay.
Let me double check if it came out okay. Give me a minute. And it did not come out. We're gonna have to redo that one.
Oh, Gladys, I like your little baby.
Oh.
Oh,
I don't want to block
your
you.
baby is the reason we do this work, okay?
Oh, we
One
lost
second.
you.
1 second.
Oh, it's
Okay.
too much.
I'm gonna count down again. 3, 2, 1.
Thank you.
Check this one. This time I got it. Thank you, everybody.
This is grandbaby number 3.
Excellent.
Haley.
Any other quick feedback before we close the meeting for today?
Just wanted to thank you, Joe, for running an efficient meeting, sticking to the agenda and everything like that. It's very, very much appreciated.
I'm a
Thank you.
project manager. I'm required to do that.
Well, I'm just saying you did a great job and I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Anybody else?
And thank you for allowing me to join. And I look forward to actually be able to contribute. I made it back from my grocery run to bring my wife her wallet and was back in time. So thank you.
Thank you, Franz. All right. Wishing everybody a great weekend.
Good. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Okay.
So we'll talk here. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I'm an opinion columnist for
Okay.
the Daily